ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनाक्तु सह वीर्यं करुवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। আচ্ছা স্টুডেন্টস, তোমাদের সঙ্গে পরিচয় করিয়ে দিই। আজকে সপ্তপর্ণী আমাদের পড়াবেন মেথডস অফ ডেটা কালেকশন। সপ্তপর্ণী ন্যাশনাল ফরেন্সিক সায়েন্স ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে ও পোস্ট গ্রাজুয়েশন কমপ্লিট করেছে। তা আজকে সপ্তপর্ণী পড়াবে। তো সপ্তপর্ণী, তুমি স্টার্ট করো।
Okay, sir. So my name is Saptaparni and I'm currently completing my MA in criminology with psychology from National Forensic Science University, Gandhinagar, as sir just said. And I have recently joined RPRIT as an academic assistant in forensic psychology. And this is my first class. So I'm a little bit nervous, but also excited to be interacting with all of you. And before I start today's topic, I would first like to like the students to introduce themselves. So if the students can please tell me their names and give like a very brief introduction about their academic qualifications. Payal, Ashmita, if you can please unmute yourselves.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I'm Payal Banerjee. I have completed my PhD in psychology. I have yet not been awarded. My thesis is submitted in the month of February, so I'm yet to be awarded. Presently, I'm working as a psychology teacher. I have my own institution for I teach the students for competitive examinations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ashmita? Ashmita, are you there?
Ashmita, yeah, she has just joined.
She just joined. Ashmita, can you like briefly introduce yourself? Qualification.
Ashmita, please you unmute.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Ashmita, please.
My name is Ashmita. I have completed my master's in clinical psychology, and currently I am pursuing the entrance exams for MPhil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
So thank you, everyone. Okay, before we start, I want to put a disclaimer that this is, and so there might be certain shortcomings in my teaching and understanding of the topic. Has also is from a clinical psychology background, so there might be like certain things that you guys would know better than me, of course. So I'm session very interactive and not consider it as a lecture but like as a discussion. So, and I'm not a professional, this is my first time taking any class, so I'll try to make this class as interactive and interesting as possible, and I want you guys also to cooperate and interact and ask your doubts and queries. If at any point of time I'm not audible to you guys, guys can tell me because my internet might be a little unstable. And if you have any queries or doubts, you can stop me and ask them right away. So I'll start with the intro of the topic. So as our topic is methods of data collection. So we will be focusing on what is data in a research. We'll be talking about data collection, the different types of data, that is primary data and secondary data, and the methods of collection of primary and secondary data. We'll also be talking about and qualitative research. Now, I'm currently doing my research, which is on female criminality, which is a purely qualitative research. So I am more into the qualitative research zone. But sir is also here, so if I'm not able to explain like anything related to research, so sir will probably help me out. And then we'll be talking about the different methods of quantitative and qualitative data collection. And lastly, we'll be talking about data collection in a mixed method research. So as we know that research process, any research has different steps to it. So we start with a problem.
তো তুমি ফুল স্ক্রিন করবে, তোমার সুবিধা হবে না, একটু ফুল স্ক্রিন করা যাবে?
স্যার আমারটা ফুল স্ক্রিনেই আছে, আমি তো ফুল স্ক্রিন
না, তোমারটা ফুল স্ক্রিন দেখাচ্ছে না। তুমি ওই নিচের দিকে দেখো, ওখানে যে 70% লেখা আছে তার পাশে একটা অ্যাঙ্কর আছে, ওইখান আইকন আছে, ওই আইকনটা ক্লিক করো। নিচে দেখো 70% লেখা আছে, দেখতে পাচ্ছ?
স্যার ফুল স্ক্রিন হয়েছে?
না, ভিউতে গিয়ে ক্লিক করে দেখো না ফুল স্ক্রিন হয় কিনা।
স্যার আমি স্টপ করে আবার স্টার্ট।
না না, স্টপ করতে হবে না। এই পায়েল, তুমি তো একটু গাইড করতে পারো।
না, আমি ভাবলাম কি মানে উনি এরকম ভাবেই মানে হয়তো কমফোর্টেবল।
ফুল স্ক্রিন করলে না জিনিসটা ভালো আসবে, বোঝা যাবে।
স্যার এখন হয়েছে?
না, ফুল স্ক্রিন আসেনি। তুমি ওপরে দেখো ভিউ লেখা আছে, ভিউটা ক্লিক করো।
স্যার আমি জানি, আমি ইয়েতে করছি, ফুল স্ক্রিনে দিয়েছি আমি এটা, কিন্তু এটা আমার স্ক্রিনে তো ফুলই দেখাচ্ছে।
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা,
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
আমাকে এখানে দেখাচ্ছে না। ওকে, ছেড়ে দাও, ঠিক আছে, তুমি যা করছো করো।
ওকে স্যার, আমার জুমটা একটু প্রবলেম করে মাঝে মধ্যে স্যার, হয়তো বা এটার জন্য।
না না, এখানে ওখানে জুমের প্রবলেম না, এখানে অন্য প্রবলেম। ঠিক আছে, তুমি করো, পড়াও স্টোরি।
Okay. Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, so any research has different steps to it. So we start by identifying any problem, and then we do the literature review. In order to find out what researches or what works have already been done, so as to have a backing of our research, as to have a better understanding of that topic. And then we do, so if it's a quantitative research, we do research hypothesis. If it's a qualitative research, we do research question. Then depending on our topic and the type of research and our variables, we choose a study design. And after that, we do sampling. So there are different types of sampling techniques. The step of the research that today we are going to be focusing on, that is collecting data for research. So after we call our dissertation, our thesis, our PhD, or just any sort of research paper, the writing part. So I'll start with what is data in any research. So data is a collection of facts, figures, symbols, or events that are gathered from different sources. Now, organized better decisions. That is from an organizational point of view. Researchers also collect data to support their study. So without data, it would be very difficult for to collect data on product demand and sale and customer preferences, competitors, etc. So as to be able to make a better and informed decision about their product, so as to better them to understand talk about other. In case data is not collected beforehand, the organizations like the product that they have launched may lead to failure for many reasons, because has failed to understand data is very. And also when I talk from a purely academic point of view, data is important so as to know or understand the research problem better, to understand the need of the people, the masses, as to why we should carry a research. Of course, we do research not just to publish a paper, but to like it has a much larger much larger need in the society. So that is for that data becomes extremely important, and it's a very valuable asset to a researcher, to any organization, to any NGO, to government. The data is extremely important. So when we talk of the different types of research data, we have, for example, documents, spreadsheets, notebooks, questionnaires. These are the type of data which are available to us in different forms. It can be photographs, it can be films, it can be different studies and models or algorithms, which are mostly useful in quantitative type of research, and videos and audios, text, etc. So all of these are the different types of data that are available to us. Now we come to what is data collection and how do we go about data collection, and what are the steps in data collection. So data collection is a process of gathering information from all relevant sources to find a solution to the research problem. It helps to evaluate the outcome of the problem, and the data collection method allows us to conclude an answer to the relevant to the question that we are looking to answer. Based on our data, we make a conclusion, and that is generally the answer of the research question that we are looking for it, or on the basis of the data we either accept or reject our hypothesis. So most of the organization use data collection methods to make assumption about future possibilities and trends. And once the data is collected, it is necessary to undergo a data organization process, because sometimes the data that we get is so vague, or it's sometimes so much that we actually need to sit down and put the data in an Excel sheet, or kind of collect the data. Otherwise it becomes very overwhelming. So to better analyze and better understand the data collection and data organization is very important. Now, when we talk about data collection, so there are different steps of data collection. So the first step is defining the aim of the research. The second step is choosing the data collection method. Step 3 is planning the data collection procedure, and the step 4 is the final collection of the data. Now I'll explain each step in a little detail. So as I said before, the data collection is a very systematic process of gathering any observation or measurement. So whether we are performing any research for business, governmental, or academic purpose, data collection allows us to gain first-hand knowledge and original insight into the research. While methods and aims may differ between fields, the overall purpose of data collection remains largely the same. And before you begin collecting data, like we need to consider a lot of things. First of all is, of course, the aim of the research. What am I trying to gain from the research? What is the objective of my research? The second is the type of data. Is it going to be primary data? Is it going to be secondary data? Is my data going to be qualitative? Is it going to be quantitative? We have to decide on that before we start the journey of data collection. And the third is the method and procedure that we will use to collect and store the data and process the data later on. Am I talking too fast? Is what I'm saying understandable?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so like the pace is fine, right?
Yeah, for me.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we will start now with the steps. So the first step is defining the aim of the research. So before we start to process any data, it is important for us to start by writing a problem statement. It is what is the practical or scientific issue that we want to address and why does it matter? You know, there are so many issues in the world and we cannot research about anything and everything. So why is it important to have like one particular issue or one particular problem? And you know, like when we talk about research and when we select a problem, it has to be, it cannot be very broad. Like I cannot research on finding all possible solutions for global warming. I have to like pick one topic and stick to it and research within that particular, like particular ambit of the research. So my ambit of research has to be very specific. So once the problem statement is decided and the research question is precisely ready, which defines what we want to find out, depending on the research question, we might need to collect a quantitative or qualitative form of data. Now I'll come to the quantitative and qualitative part later, but just to give like a brief idea, quantitative data is expressed in numbers and graphs, as we might all know, and it's analyzed through statistical methods. Whereas, on the other hand, qualitative data is expressed in words and analyzed through interpretation and categorization. They are very different from each other. One talks about numbers and figures, and the second is talking about words and interpretations of themes, etc. So, if our aim is to test a hypothesis and measure something precisely or gain large scale statistical insight, we need to collect quantitative data. If our aim is to explore ideas, understand experiences of people, or gain detailed insight into a specific context, we collect qualitative data. So that is like the basic difference between the two. And another type of research is mixed method research. So when we want to do both, when we want to like gain large scale statistical insight, plus we want to like tap into understandings and experiences and explore ideas, we do a mixed method research which collects both types of data. So this, now we come to the second step, which is choosing the data collection method. So when we choose a data collection method, it is largely based on the topic that is at hand, and which method is best suited for that kind of research. So we have different types of data collection method. We have experimental, we have interview, we have focus groups, ethnography, surveys, and it all depends on the type of topic that we have at hand. So for it is experimental. So why do we conduct experimental research? It is to basically test a causal relationship. And how do we do that? We manipulate a variable and measure their effect on the other variable. So like there are two types of variables, dependent and independent variable. So we manipulate the independent variable to see its effect on the dependent variable. And while we also try to control the extraneous variables, that is a type of experimental research. Then we have surveys. So in order to understand the general characteristics or opinion of a group of people or population. So the biggest example of surveys is our census, which is done every 10 years, and it collects numbers about like the people, their different demographics like age, gender, sex, religion, etc. So we do survey. Then we have interviews or focus groups, which are to gain like an in-depth understanding or perception or opinion on a topic. So interviews and focus group discussions are a part of qualitative research, where we want to find out like people's experience of a particular topic. So I'll share my master's dissertation with you, which I have worked on for like last 6 to 7 months. So my topic was female criminality, and I was basically trying to measure uh, female offenders' feelings of guilt, shame, and remorse after an act has been committed. So, for this, the interview method or a semi structured interview method was the method that I picked, where I would go and interact with female offenders and note down their perception, note down their feelings and emotions about an act, why they did this. Because the literature review and previous research suggests that there's a difference between the type of crime committed by men and the type of crime committed by women. So like we had to like to understand female criminality, we have to take all of these things into consideration, and to understand female criminality, its causes and its dynamic nature. Qualitative research is something that would really be beneficial if that kind of research is carried out with certain this kind of topic. So next we have observation, which is to understand something in its natural setting. So observation is generally carried out. So there is something known as shadowing. I don't know if you guys know. So shadowing is when a researcher follows a particular person, and tries to note down the person's daily activities and where like his lifestyle and everything, and that the person the researcher is observing is it becomes a participant to the research. So that is how observation is carried out. Then we have ethnography, which is to study the culture of a community or organization from a first hand experience. So this works when the researcher joins and participates in a community and records their actions. Then we have archival research, which is to understand current or historical events, conditions, or practices. So this type of research is mostly done in subjects which are more has to do with social sciences or history. And there like they mostly have to access manuscripts, documents, or records from libraries and the internet. So that is archival research. Now we come to the third step of our data collection, that is planning our data collection procedure. So when we already know which method we are trying to use, and we need to plan exactly how we will implement that, how we will go about the research, what procedures the researcher has to follow to make like acute observation or measurement. So then like the planning starts. So the planning also works in like different phases. So for like first we have something known as operationalization. So sometimes our variables can be measured directly. For example, we can collect data on like the average age of employees simply by asking their date of birth. However, often we will be interested in collecting data on more abstract concepts or variables that cannot be directly observed. So operationalization means turning abstract conceptual ideas into measurable observations. When planning how we will go about the data collection, we need to translate the conceptual definition of what we want to study into the operational definition of what we actually want to measure. So this was about operationalization. Then we have sampling. So sampling is to define a population or the group that we want to draw a conclusion about, that we want to draw our results from. Our sampling method will determine how we will recruit participants, or which participants will be selected, which participants will be left out, or is it going to be like random, like everyone has an equal chance. So sampling, like there are different types of sampling, which I won't discuss in detail. Then we have something known as standardizing procedure. So in a subject like forensic psychology, standardizing becomes very important. So if multiple researchers are involved, we have to write a detailed manual to standardize data collection procedures in our study. This means laying out specific step-by-step instruction so that everyone in your research team collects data in a consistent way. We all know that when we are collecting data, so in forensic psychology, we mostly deal with instruments, and we deal with instruments like polygraph and VOS, SDS, and LTA. So there has to be a standardized procedure to do it. Otherwise, the result that is collected will not be correct, and our research result that is obtained will also be wrong. So standardization in a field like psychology and forensic psychology is very, very important. It helps to ensure the reliability of our data, and we can also use it to replicate the study in the future. So reliability and validity in such type of researches are very, very important. So we need to have a plan, and we need to have a very standardized way of going about things. It is like a step-by-step manual that we have to follow. And finally, the fourth step is the collection of the data. Now, finally, this is the stage where we can implement our chosen method to measure or observe the variables that we are interested in. Now when we have decided whether we are collecting qualitative or quantitative data to about perception of someone, we will have like certain open-ended questions, and we have decided our sample size, so we can finally go about our data collection. So based on the method and the type of data that we have collected, we can finally start with the collection of data. So yeah, next we have data collection method. So before I start with this topic, is what I've spoken so far clear? Are there any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so when we talk about data, we mostly have two types of data, which is primary data and secondary data. So primary data is data that can be generated by the researcher himself or herself. The researcher can go out in the field and collect that data. So primary data would include surveys, interviews, experiments, specially designed for understanding and solving research problem at hand. So primary data collection is first-hand data collection. And then we have secondary data. So secondary data is using existing data existing data that is already present, like either generated by large government institutions or healthcare facilities, etc. So as part of organizational record keeping. So that data has already been collected. We just have to, get the data and use it for our research. So can anybody give me an example of secondary data that we use in like field of psychology or forensic psychology or criminology? Can anyone give any example? It can any so the example is sorry, your voice was cracking. I did not get you.
Yeah, like for maybe forensic psychology or criminology, we can refer to old court cases, perhaps.
yes, that can be like when we are doing like a case study. So we refer
Yeah.
to old judgments and old cases all the time. That's a good example. Another very, the record keeping agency in India is the National Crime Records Bureau. So every year, the National Crime Records Bureau releases its data on crime in India. The it releases it in like 3 volumes, if I'm not wrong, and it is called Crime in India. The top, like, the book is called Crime in India, and it releases data state wise, gender wise, and age wise. So like it's like huge bulk of data that NCRB releases every year, and this data is used in research as a secondary data or as a supporting data. So I have used a lot of NCRB's data in my research for my dissertation. So that data is very helpful. It's authentic. It's government data, and it's like the only crime data available in India. We do not conduct any victim surveys, so to understand like crime and criminality, that is the only data that is available to us. Now, when we talk about primary and secondary data, uh, there are like certain other differences as well. So primary data is collected in real time, and secondary data can be past data. So suppose we want to compare or do a trend analysis of last 10 years of data in juvenile delinquency. So what we do, we cannot go and ask, it's not possible for us and collect like first hand data of last 10 years. Nobody remembers, and like it's practically not possible. So we have NCRB data, or we have like data of different ministries for that. So we can just to go on the internet and collect those data, and our comparison becomes very easy. Then the process. So in primary data, the researcher has a very active role. The researcher is very involved in the process of data collection. And in secondary data, the researcher does not have a very active role. The role of the researcher is passive, as in the data analysis and writing part. But the secondary data is very quick and easy, and it's easily accessible as well. So, sorry. So yeah, that kind of data is very convenient for the researcher to get. The researcher does not have to like put in much effort and do any field work to collect that sort of data. So what are the sources of primary data? Now, primary data can be in the form of surveys, observations, experiments, questionnaires, personal interviews, etc. And secondary data can be government publications or websites, books, journals, or articles, or any archival records of history, etc. Now, primary data collection can be expensive for the researcher. The researcher actually has to like bear his own expenses, go out, talk to people, and go visit like jails, and might visit NGOs to collect those data. But in secondary data, it's very economical. It's just a click away, on your computer. You can easily access those data, or maybe visit a library and get access to books and records. So it's not that expensive. It's very economical, it's convenient, it's less time consuming. And the primary data always is very specific to the needs of the researcher, whereas the secondary data may not be specific. So when I'm talking about crime in India statistics, so it talks about all the type of crime. Like it comes in 3 volumes. It's very bulky. You literally have to go through all the data to find exactly what you need. Okay, it's not served to you on a platter like, oh, this is the data you need and you have it. Like here are the numbers and figures. It doesn't work like that. So you actually have to put an effort, go through the data, and read all the data that is available and extract what you want. But whereas in primary data collection, the researcher has a question, he has a hypothesis, he already has a set plan. He just has to go and collect and exactly ask the right questions, and exactly collect the exact data that is needed. So the and mostly in qualitative research, like where we have huge chunks of data, like when for example you are interviewing someone on their experience on COVID, for example. So how was COVID like? So for example, you have like 20 samples, 20 respondents, and everyone will have like a different experience. And it's like huge transcripts. Like you have like so much bulk of data. You actually have to sit with it and pick out the important or the relevant parts of it. So that is like primary, that is a form of primary data which is available in very crude form. It's not refined. The researcher actually has to work on the data and extract the useful and the necessary part of it. Whereas in the secondary type of data, it's quite refined. You know, like even though the researcher has to like analyze bulk of data, but then it's much more convenient and it's much more easier to extract like the required amount of data. So this is the comparison table you guys can refer to. Next, we come to the quantitative versus qualitative data collection method. So what is quantitative and what is qualitative data? So quantitative data is data that can be expressed in number or which can be quantified. Okay, so for example, quantitative data is something that is like you know, like someone's age, for example, or someone's gender. So these are like data which can be, you know, quantified very easily. These are numerical data, and the data is collected in a closed-ended question form. For example, the Likert scale or the multiple type questions. So where the options are already available to us, and we just have to pick one. And whereas in qualitative data, the information cannot be expressed in numbers. So for example, if I ask someone, how has your experience in COVID been? So the person is going to tell me the medical infrastructure was crumbling in the country, and you know, there was no beds in the hospital, and my family members were sick and all of that. So you cannot really quantify someone's feelings, emotions, and a qualitative type of data. It cannot be counted, it cannot be put in numbers. The quantitative data is mostly numbers and statistics, and the qualitative data can be observations or someone's ideas or their perceptions, etc. Now the questions that the quantitative type of data tries to answer is how many or how much or how often, you know, like variables which can be quantified. And in qualitative data, we are why something has happened. So I'll give you an example of quantitative and qualitative data in the field of forensic psychology. So quantitative data mostly some sort of instruments, or we are, you know, working on some sort of scales and all. So the data collected from those surveys and those questionnaire are mostly quantitative in nature. So for example, you must have heard about this instrument called polygraph. It is known as lie detector, but that is like a misnomer. It's not, it doesn't detect lie, it detects deception. Polygraph so and micro movement. So these are the things that the polygraph measures, and a series of questions are asked to the suspect who is made to sit on the instrument, and then the data is collected. Now a quantitative data using polygraph would be you know, to see the sex difference between males who commit a certain crime. So suppose someone has, like, there's a mock crime scenario and someone has committed a crime, so that can be like a area of research where sex difference is measured in male versus female, their you know, difference in reaction. And in qualitative data, as I said, so my topic, which is on female criminality, dynamic in nature over the years. So that is like one example. Then the other difference are like quantitative research is mostly close-ended questions. The answers can be easily turned into numbers or graphs or tables. The answers can be yes or no. numbers or graphs. But in qualitative research, the answers are mostly open-ended and they're detailed answers without any numeric value. And the data that is obtained via research is either used in quantitative research is used for testing ideas, making predictions, or learning about the market, the customers, etc. And in qualitative research, it's more to understand thought patterns and behavior of a person, to gain insight into a person's lived experiences, to find out new ideas and problems and opportunities that the person wants to talk about. Now, it is said that quantitative data is much more reliable and objective because it can be statistically tested and it can be replicated. But it is not the case with qualitative data, because qualitative data is very subjective and it will differ from one person to another person, and over a time the nature of the data will change. So, but on the other hand, with that being said, qualitative data involves us a much deeper understanding into a problem, which quantitative data does not. Quantitative data on a very surface level tells us that, oh, there's a correlation there, or there's a dependency of a certain variable on another variable, or there's a relation there, and there's a regression there. But if you want to find out or dive deeper into like the needs or the demands of society or the cause of something, then qualitative data is what we go to. Yeah, and in quantitative data, we mostly use surveys and questionnaires, and which are mostly close-ended. And in qualitative data, they are open-ended, group discussion, interviews, etc. So, any questions so far?
Hello, Saptaparni.
Hi, sir.
Can you give some example from the forensic psychology aspect? Because whatever the example you have written, that is not the forensic psychology. So shoe size and other things you have written. The example should be from the forensic psychology. Okay.
So forensic psychology, sir, as I said, so when we are working on any instrument, like I gave the example of polygraph. So when we are working on polygraph, so we can measure a lot of things. Like, for example, if you want to measure the reliability or the sensitivity or specificity of a particular instrument, like polygraph, or we have
they have no idea about the polygraph. Hello.
oscillation signature.
Saptaparni, please you
Yes,
tell
sir.
them what is polygraph. After that, they can understand what is polygraph.
Okay, so I'll give a brief introduction about the instrument that is polygraph.
Yes.
So a polygraph, yes. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
If possible, you can show the picture of
basic.
polygraph. You can show the picture of polygraph. No problem.
Okay, sir, I'll try.
So that the students can understand what is polygraph and why the polygraph is important in data collection.
Okay, so I'll have to.
Because you have a lot of the ideas about the instruments, but they do not have that idea. No? They have not seen polygraph. They have not seen BOs and other
so
things.
I have a presentation on polygraph, which has a picture of the instrument. I'll just look for it.
During your interview, your presentation is on polygraph, so you can show that polygraph.
Yeah. Yes, I'm just showing that. So is the screen visible?
Yes, this is visible.
Okay. So this is how the polygraph instrument looks like. And so polygraph is basically a device that records a series of physiological responses or physiological indicators such as blood pressure, pulse, respiration, etc., while a person is asked and answers a series of questions. So the underlying theory of polygraph is that when people lie, they also get measurably nervous about lying. The heartbeat will increase, the blood pressure goes up, the breathing rhythm changes, and the precipitation, that is the GSR, also increases. So a baseline for these physiological characteristics is established by asking the subject question whose answer the investigator knows, and the deviation from the baseline is taken as a sign of lying. Now, here in the picture, you can see different instruments are attached to the person's body. So we have something known as the cardiosismograph, which measures blood pressure and heart rate. And it's one of the very important components of polygraph, which consists of blood pressure cuff that is wrapped around the subject's arm, preferably the right arm of the subject. And during the questioning, the cuff remains inflated. The movement of blood through the subject's veins generates a sound that is transmitted through the air in the cuff. And the magnitude of the sound that relates to blood pressure, and the frequency of the changes in the sound relates to the heart rate. So this is how the cardiosismograph works. Then we have the pneumograph component of the polygraph, which records the subject's respiration. So one tube is placed around the subject's chest, and a second is placed around the subject's abdomen. So these tubes are filled with air, and when the subject breathes, changes in the air pressure is recorded in the tubes and is recorded by the polygraph instrument. And then we have the galvanometer, which is the section of polygraph that records the amount of precipitation produced. So it consists of electrical sensors called galvanometers, and these are attached to the subject's fingertips. Left hand alternate finger, like the index finger and the ring finger, it will be attached to. And the skin of on the fingertips contains like very high density of sweat glands, so which makes them a very good location to measure precipitation. As the amount of sweating as the amount of sweating that touches the galvanometer increases, the resistance of the electrical current measured decreases, and these changes are recorded by the polygraph. Now, the fourth instrument that is a part of the polygraph machine is the P gauge. So a P gauge is basically to record micro movement. It is placed under the hip of the subject, and the subject is made to sit on a cushion shaped instrument which measures movement. So these are the components of polygraph. I'll take a separate class on the different forensic psychological investigative techniques that are there and interview techniques that are there. But for now, I think this much introduction is enough. Sir,
Okay.
should I come back to the topic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just a minute. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay. Next we were talking about the types of data that is collected in a quantitative research. So quantitative in quantitative research, we mostly measured data using certain experiments or controlled observation. We have certain surveying techniques such as questionnaires. We do longitudinal studies. We have cross-sectional studies and interviews also. So the data that is collected can be easily quantified and can be easily put into numbers and figures and graphs. So this part I have already discussed. Now I can skip this part, right? We have already spoken about the surveys and the correlational methods. So the surveys are basically it involves collection of secondary data or use of questionnaire to collect feedback from a predefined set of respondents. We have correlational method, which is to test the relationship of between two variables, whether there's any sort of relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. Then we have experimental research, where some sort of experiment is involved, and the findings are in the form of statistics. And we also try to do the experiment in a very controlled setting, where we as a researcher have control over the extraneous variables. And then we have causal comparative methods, where which involves the testing of secondary or primary data of independent or dependent variable, and we try to identify if there's a cause or effect relationship between the two. So yeah. And then we come to like the types of quantitative data. So we have basically three types of quantitative data, that is descriptive data, comparative data, and relationship data. So descriptive data, to simply put it, descriptive statistics allows us to usually quantify a variable for a target group. So for example, we do certain type of target survey for any transport. Or if you want an example from forensic psychology, so for example, we want to measure the response of people aged 18 to 25 years to a device like polygraph. People in the age of 18 to 25 who are physically fit and who do not have any issues like diabetes or high blood pressure, under normal condition, what is their reaction to an instrument like polygraph. Then we come to comparative data. So this collection allows comparison of two or more target groups based on one or more variables. Group maybe hello.
You are audible, yes.
Sir, did my I get disconnected?
Hello, Saptaparni, you are audible.
Sir, did my network get disconnected in between?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about relationship data. So in relationship data, we try to see trends or association or relationship between two or more variables. For example, there is one group where we give them a certain medicine, and the second group we give them placebo, and we try to see the reaction and compare the results of both the groups. So this is the third type. Now quantitative research is very objective in nature. It's easy to analyze, and conclusions are very generalizable, and it's replicable also. So these are the strengths of quantitative data. Now we come to collecting data in a qualitative research. So this is a chart that talks about the ethical consideration that we have to keep in mind while collecting data that is qualitative in nature, because qualitative data can be very sensible, and sometimes the topic might be something that the researcher feels very strongly about. So the researcher has to be very careful that the researcher doesn't let his or her biases come in the way, or doesn't let his or her biases affect the validity of the data or the authenticity of the data that is collected. And sometimes there's something known as a confirmation bias in qualitative data, which is a form of research bias, where the researcher favors the data which confirms their beliefs or hypothesis. and they try to not include the data that goes against their belief or their hypothesis. So these are some things that needs to be taken care of while we collect qualitative data. Now, the nature of data in qualitative research. So these are the different forms of data that exist. So we have the physical form of data, which is like people giving interviews or group discussions. We have books, we have films, we have different archives, etc. And then we have like speeches, we have manuscripts, etc., which are secondary form of data. And then there are certain non-verbal data in qualitative research. So non-verbal data means that we as a researcher, we observe the participants reaction or expression when we are doing that research, and that is also included in the research. So when a person is speaking about an issue, like if the person is talking about criminality, or the person is talking about him or her feeling a sense of shame or guilt after committing a crime. So we, as a researcher, have to observe the body language of the person as well. Like, is the person only saying these things because he's being interviewed, and he has to show those kind of emotion just to get empathy from the researcher, or does he actually like feel any form of shame or guilt about the crime that he or she has committed? So these are the methods of qualitative data. We have survey methods, which is where we interview different people and we collect data. Now, there are different advantages and challenges which are mentioned here. Now, these can be completely anonymous, and they are not replicable. These are very subjective. So these are some issues with qualitative research. Then we have interviews as well. So to understand someone's impression or experiences, or to learn more about that person's life in depth, we have interview method. We have observation, where we gather first-hand information about people and then events, etc. This is also a type of quality research. Then we have focus groups. So where different people, in small groups of 5, 6 participants, they come together, they sit and they talk about a certain issue. So homosexuality is something that, when we study a very sensitive topic like homosexuality, so it's best to like conduct focus group discussions in those type of cases, because people who have similar gender identities would want to come together and speak about their common or shared experiences. Or when we speak about gender discrimination, so it might be useful to have like a group of women who sit together and talk about different experiences that they have, and they can resonate and relate to each other's experiences, and talk more openly about it in a setting where they know that there are other people who have also gone through those similar experiences. Then we have case studies. So if you want to study about serial killers, so we pick out serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy, and we study their lives. We study the type of like their psychological state of bent of mind, or like their life history as to like the type of childhood trauma they have been through, and we try to draw parallels, or we try to look for our answers in those type of studies. Now, there are other types of qualitative studies as well. So there's something known as shadowing, where the researcher accompanies a single participant everywhere and then notes down the normal day of the person, and the shadower is present. They observe everything, like their telephonic conversation, and they sit where the participant is working and they try to gather data. Then we have autobiographical narratives. So there are accounts of personal information of the person. The study of autobiographical narratives makes it possible for the people to understand better how people construct their reality and they develop a narrative. So that is very important if we are doing like a qualitative type of study and we want to understand a person in depth. Then we have different types of interviews. So we have something known as open interviews, where the respondent only like they only talk about a general field issue about which they are asked. And I've given an example. I'm interested in the use of seat belts. Would you tell me what do you think about it? So I'm as a researcher, I'm trying to get the person's take on a certain issue, and that's a very open interview. Like the person can talk about anything and everything. If I ask someone, in forensic psychology, we tend to look into people's childhood experiences, or people's mental state. So there have been researchers where people's personalities have been linked to their childhood treatment. So like for example, you talk to a participant and you want to know like how their childhood experiences or parenting has shaped their adult life. So the person can keep on talking about their childhood, and how he was treated, how his relationship with his parents and his siblings were. So these are like the different things that would get spoken about in such kind of an interview. Then we have a semi-structured interview where a set of questions are generally prepared. Now, there can be certain deflection from those questions as well, but the researcher generally tries to stick to the questions that are at hand, and only talk about those issues, uh, uh, and not deviate from the issue at hand. And then there are completely structured interviews, so where the researcher already has a fixed set of questions, and the researcher just asks those questions straight away. There is no deflection, there is they just talk about the issue at hand, and the researcher does not generally modify uh, the questions or the next few questions based on the responses of the participants. So the questions are very much fixed, and like no changes are made. Then we have group interviews. So as I said, in case of people who have had similar experiences, if we make them sit together in a group, they're more they'll be more open and friendly, and they'll be sympathetic towards each other, and they'll also get a bit of encouragement to speak more openly about the issue that they have faced. And we can gather large amounts of data from that. Now we come to the last topic, that is data collection in a mixed method study. So mixed method study is a study that involves like both qualitative and quantitative data, and it has both the aspects of data in it. For example, if we want to see the childhood experiences of juvenile delinquents, and we also want to administer some questionnaire like the AC, that is the advanced childhood questionnaire on them. So the questionnaire would become the scale would become the qualitative part of it, and then we want to like get an in-depth understanding as well, so that will be the qualitative part of it. And then we can take both the data, we can analyze them separately, and we can present that in a way, and it becomes a mixed method study. So here are the different phases of mixed method study, and the qualitative and the quantitative component of it. So in the sampling, the quantitative part would be random sampling, and the qualitative part will be purposive or convenient sampling. And the source of data in quantitative research would be instruments or checklists, and in qualitative research it would be open-ended interviews and open-ended observations. And in quantitative data, the recording of the data, the instruments with scores that are reliable and valid. So when we talk about like checklists and scales, so there is already like a scoring that is there, so we just have to score them. And in qualitative data, of course there is no scoring, the data is very subjective, so we analyze, we do like maybe thematic analysis or inductive theme development or deductive, or it depends. So that was it. We have come to an end of our PPT, and I'll just end my presentation here.
Thank you, Saptaparni. Very nicely you have covered. If possible, next time you will present your own dissertation so that the students will be aware about how to write the methodology, okay, how to collect the data and all those things. So that will be very useful. Or if
Okay,
you have
sir.
any other research that you can use, okay? Because
sir.
the students are very advanced, so they are very much interested in forensic psychology as a career. So please
Okay, sir.
guide them, okay?
Okay. So when I was told to teach like the research methodology part, I was not told that I have to focus on like a forensic science psychology perspective. Like I tried to include examples as much as I could, but then when Ashma they told me that I have to teach this paper, she did not mention like I have to teach it from a forensic psychological perspective. Otherwise, I would have included like more examples from the field.
No problem, no problem. I will discuss everything with you later on,
Okay.
okay? Okay,
Okay, sir.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So Payal, Oshmita, কেমন লাগলো বলো?
তো বেশ ভালোই লাগলো, এমনিতে অনেকদিন পরে ক্লাস হলো তো, আর উনিও এত ভালো করে বুঝিয়েছেন উইথ লাইক এক্সাম্পলস দিয়ে আর কি, তো বেশ ভালো লাগলো।
অস্মিতা, তোমার কেমন লাগলো?
স্যার ভালোই।
ভালো লেগেছে?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ।
মানে বুঝতে কোথাও অসুবিধা হয়নি তো?
না না না।
দুটো ডিফারেন্স ধরতে পেরেছো, কোনটা কোয়ালিটেটিভ আর কোনটা কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ?
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
এবার তোমরা একটু চিন্তা ভাবনা করো, হ্যাঁ, যে একটা পেপার তো প্রেজেন্ট করতে হবে। আমাদের সেপ্টেম্বরে একটা সিম্পোজিয়াম আছে, তো তাতে সবাই পেপার প্রেজেন্ট করবে। তোমরা একটু ভাবো যে কি ধরনের পেপার তৈরি করা যায়, কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ হোক কোয়ালিটেটিভ হোক যাই হোক না কেন, রিভিউ পেপারে চলবে, অল্প ডেটা হলেও চলবে, কিন্তু প্রেজেন্টটা করতে হবে, ওকে? সপ্তপর্ণী তোমাদের গাইড করে দেবে, অসুবিধা হবে না। ঠিক আছে, তবে আমি প্রেয়ারটা করে দিয়ে শেষ করে দিচ্ছি, একটু হাত জোর করবে। ওম পূর্ণমদঃ পূর্ণমিদং পূর্ণমুদচ্যতে পূর্ণস্য পূর্ণমাদায় পূর্ণমেবাবশিষ্যতে। ওম শান্তি শান্তি শান্তি। পায়েল এবং অস্মিতা, তোমাদের একটাই ছোট্ট রিকোয়েস্ট, যে আজকে যা পড়লে যা শুনলে এগুলো সব ভিডিওতে থেকে যাবে, কিন্তু তোমরা একটা রাইট আপ তৈরি করবে, ওকে? আজকে যা শিখলে যা বুঝলে একটা রাইট আপ করে দিলে তোমাদের পক্ষেও সুবিধা হবে, আমাদের পক্ষেও সুবিধা হবে। তুমি কতটা শিখতে পেরেছো, তুমি কতটা জানতে পেরেছো সেটাও জানতে পারবো। গ্রুপে লিখে দেবে, হ্যাঁ?
ওকে স্যার।
থ্যাংক ইউ সপ্তপর্ণী, খুব ভালো হয়েছে, খুব সুন্দর হয়েছে। তোমার স্টুডেন্টরা বলেছে যে ভালো হয়েছে, ওরা বুঝতে পেরেছে। এটা একজন টিচারের পক্ষে খুবই আনন্দের।
Thank you.